Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland is certainly an interesting remake. From a gameplay perspective, it's very well designed, albeit a bit easier than the original version of Kirby's Adventure. It also resolves the issue of the original being a bit slow and laggy at times. And I also think the music is great too. I've always had a soft spot for tinny GBA and DS MIDIs, so I think it sounds great for what it is. However, one very strange aspect of this remake is its presentation. It really kind of feels like a mixed bag in quite a lot of ways. On one hand, the sprite work is great, and the backgrounds look very nice, but at the same time, it seems like they almost entirely missed the point of how some areas were supposed to look. The interesting part about this remake is that it was actually directed by Sakurai, and this was technically the last mainline Kirby title that he directed, not counting Amazing Mirror since he wasn't the director for that game. And Sakurai is usually known for sticking very close to the source material of his original games, so the creative liberties that this remake took are certainly pretty interesting. As I mentioned in the intro, the sprite work is easily the best part of this remake's art direction. Not only does it faithfully expand upon the original, but it actually feels like an evolution of Superstar's sprite work. The designer, Teruhiko Suzuki, even mentioned that the movement and animation were directly built off of Superstars. The sprite work in the game was so good that it practically served as the basis for handheld Kirby games throughout the rest of the 2000s, including both flagships games and even Superstar Ultra. They even are still making merch of these sprites to this day as well. It was also nice seeing the ability hats being incorporated into Adventure, and seeing the debut of Spark, High Jump, and Needle ability hats. I feel like most of the enemies and bosses also got glow-ups as well. They all have designs that you would expect for them to have, except for... wait, who in the wowie zowie are you? So it turns out that they completely replaced Rolling Turtle with a completely new character called Fanfan. This is an absolute travesty. I can't believe they completely removed one of the most charming mini-bosses in the game and replaced it with such a cheap imitator. I will not stand for this. Justice for Rolling Turtle. In all seriousness though, I still like Fanfan, but I find it a bit strange that they replaced just one mini-boss. They also replaced the enemies Bounder and Spiny with Gip and Needless. Now, these I can kind of understand a bit more, since Bounder's design is a bit plain and generic, and Spiny is basically just Spiny from Mario. But overall, I think the sprite work and character design look pretty good for the most part, but unfortunately, this is the peak of the remake's art direction. Things start to go downhill from here. The way that the environments were handled in this remake were certainly a mixed bag to say the least. Some of the areas look great and are very faithful to the original, but others look very off. But I think it should be fair to look at each world to see how each of them compare to the original. First, we have Vegetable Valley, and I think the background was handled fairly well. Maybe a bit too realistic for my liking, but I still really appreciate it. Wait a second, now there's a desolate mountain-themed area? Yes, I know that the original game had some mountain or rocky-themed areas in Vegetable Valley, but I feel like the remake has way too many rooms like that now, replacing a lot of grassland-themed areas, and it's to the point where it almost feels out of place. Not to mention that they completely removed most of the cliffs in this game. So now, there's a bunch of random floating platforms. I thought they were trying to be less like Mario. This was such a weird decision, because it made a lot of parts look very awkward throughout the game. It just makes this world feel less immersive, which is crazy! How do you manage to make a game less immersive than an NES game? Well, at least we don't see design choices as lazy as this in Nintendo IPs anymore. Oh, right. Moving on to Ice Cream Island, I think this area was handled pretty well. Aside from the floating cliffs, I have no gripes with this area. The same cannot be said for Butter Building. This is genuinely one of the most butchered locations I have ever seen in a remake. They straight up removed the most iconic part of this location, which by extension was one of the most iconic parts of the entire game. The spinning tower sections. It was one of the coolest visual spectacles in the original game. There is really no good excuse for why they could have removed this. This is literally a remake on more powerful hardware. This is a jump between an 8-bit and 32-bit system. The GBA could have easily handled this. And that's not the only problem I have with this area. They also changed the color of the titular building as well, making it red instead of yellow. This defeats the entire purpose because it's called Butter Building. It made sense for why it was yellow. If it's not butter and it's severely toned down the building part, is it even fair to call this Butter Building? Because I think a more fitting name for this is I can't believe it's not Butter Building. But moving on to Grape Garden, I think this area was actually handled well. Surprisingly enough, the airship section actually looks better than the original. Good job, Hal. Yogurt Yard looks pretty good too, having more detailed backgrounds that actually fit quite well. I like how they created new variants of the mountain and forest themes that set these areas apart from the previous areas. This is the type of change that actually works well in a remake. Orange Ocean also looks good for the most part too, actually living up to its namesake, having a very nice looking orange sunset background for the beach themed areas. My only problem would have to be Meta Knight's boss room, since they removed a bit of the sauce from it. Like seriously, what happened to the moon? The new background looks good in its own right, but I feel like this room should have been a bit more faithful considering how iconic this boss fight is. Then finally, we have Rainbow Resort, and I'm a bit mixed on this one. The backgrounds look absolutely beautiful and are up there as some of the best looking environments on the GBA, but on the other hand, it doesn't quite have the mysterious, mystical, and almost abstract vibes that the original had. I think this one just comes down to your preference because I think both interpretations look good in their own right. One thing that was handled excellently though was Stage 6, which is the throwback to the original Kirby's Dream Land. The effect actually looks even more impressive here, since the graphical jump between the Game Boy and GBA was much greater than between the Game Boy and NES. The Fountain of Dreams also looks really nice too, pulling its style from the Melee stage, which makes a lot of sense. But unfortunately, the moon area where you fight Nightmare's second form looks kinda weird. The ground looks fluffy for some reason, and the ground with the star-shaped patterns in the original looks so much cooler, it made the fight a lot more climactic. Not a terrible downgrade though, just a tad disappointing. So overall, the art direction of this remake was interesting. Some areas look great, even better than the original, while others seem to completely miss the point. But what exactly happened here? How did this remake end up having such a conflicting and quite confusing art direction? We don't know exactly, but my best guess is because it had a very short development time. This game barely took a year to develop, with development starting around the summer of 2001, according to Suzuki, and for reference, this game released in October of 2002. Sakurai mentioned that the backgrounds were redone to fit the standards of modern gamers at the time, and even he felt hesitant to work on a remake of this game. My theory is that there could have been some conflicting ideas during development for how they would recreate each of the areas, with some devs wanting it to look more faithful, and others wanting it to be a bit more of a reimagining. But they didn't exactly have enough time to decide on a proper compromise. One thing that I forgot to mention is that this game coincided with the release of the Kirby anime. So there is practically a lingering time limit for how long this remake could have been developed. But in the end, despite my issues with the art direction, I still think it ended up being a pretty competent remake. It's still very well designed, very fun, and I only have a few nitpicks. So anyways, that was kind of a bit of an analysis / my opinions on the art direction in Kirby Nightmare and Dreamland. If you disagreed with any of my points in this video, that is completely okay. If you liked how butter building was handled, that is completely fine. But let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm kind of interested in hearing your thoughts on how Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland was handled in terms of its art direction. But anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server and Blue Sky if you want to. Stay perky!